All right, now folks are probably tired of hearing me ask some questions this morning, so I'd like to open up to the audience. Is there any questions to maybe start with, whether it's about Open Daylight, Layer 4 through 7, or even oh, I forgot that was moving. I got that done. Or affinities with Plexi, or Layer 3 from a routing perspective. So any initial questions? Oh, come on, this crowd is crowd. All right, how many of you are still watching the iPhone announcement?
Curious. All the rumors were true.
Yeah.
There.
Hey.
Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
On L4 through L7 for whoever wants to answer. It seems like in Embrace's case or others, people are off trying to, Amazon DPC and Rex people are off trying to reinvent L4 through L7, starting over with officers and firewalls and creating software to do these things quickly on hardware. How do you put the enterprise is coming from a very mature environment for L4 through L7 services? You have your Palo Alto box, you have those firewall rules, you have a big IP box, load balancing functionality, you tune your applications for it. How do you compete with it? How do you go from folks that are used to very sophisticated products and start over with software-only instantiations? And you're losing your configurations. I got to start over and reconfigure over here and don't have the same narrower features. How do you come back to that?
So the question, just so everybody can hear, is what is the migration path from today's Layer 4 through 7 services that are tightly integrated into the hardware, have a lot of hardware-centric features into it, and how does that get converted into a software architecture? Yeah.
And I guess I can start taking this. So from our perspective, the goal for Embrain was not necessarily to displace the traditional players in the Layer 4/7 space, but rather to augment their ability to deliver the services in a software-defined way. If you think about the traditional vendors, they have a very deep expertise and very deep feature set in a specific area, but they all offer both physical appliances as well as virtual appliances. The one thing that we thought was missing when we started the company was the ability to deliver those services. So Embrain is not here to displace the services per se. Embrain is here to enable the provisioning of the services. So partnering with those traditional vendors to enable a traditional model, but allowing a software delivery of that traditional model. What we think is happening today is that there's a lot of virtualization, but people are not really consuming virtual appliances yet. And we are here to try to change that, to make sure that the virtual appliances from any existing vendors can be consumed more easily by network administrators, without necessarily transitioning the expertise and the use case to other constituencies within IT, but allowing the network expert to use those appliances like the traditional appliances were being used by the same people.
Florian, you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I believe basically in a number of cases the appliances are used to perform functions, like for example firewalls, to perform ACL functions that could be handled by the SDN networking in the middle. So there were cases where we heard about 80% usage just for basic ACLs that could be relegated to the SDN component in the middle. That's one aspect. So that actually leaves the appliance vendors to focus on what they are doing the best and basically distribute the basic functions to the networking layer. The other aspect is any SDN solution needs to be able to basically steer traffic flows to the right appliance. So I think many people call that service chaining, but it's really about being able to integrate appliances as required into the networking functions that the SDN controller performs.
So I'd like to disagree with the idea that we're not trying to replace the existing networking gear. In fact, we absolutely are going to replace the networking gear, and we are doing so today. So for those who wonder what I'm doing up here, Jeff Arnold, I'm standing in for Kelly, who had another meeting that he had to get to. And in the case of Viata, we have hundreds of thousands of virtual appliances that are in use today. I don't know where you got the idea that people aren't using virtual appliances in for networking, because they are. The reason why, but rather than focus on how do we replace them or how do we live alongside the existing gear, focus on the customer. The customer may have, yes, they've got lots and lots of long-standing practices and operational models and so on and so forth around their existing gear, but they are not immune to the two major drivers for a lot of this, which is the economics. The hardware boxes, dedicated hardware boxes are expensive, and then the rate of change, the agility that they need. It takes much longer to provision a physical box, a new physical box, than it does to stand up a new VM in your existing compute infrastructure. So, the customers want this. It's not a question of going in there and we trying to sell it to the customers who are unwilling. The customers are demanding that we give them virtual appliances which will allow them to get cost benefit and agility, and then some other benefits as well, like power management and things like that. So, we're in there displacing and having to coexist, because you can never get a greenfield deployment here. So this is real, and the customers are willing to make that change because, as Kelly pointed out, the return on the investing in change is dramatic.
And if I can respond, since you were asking me.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, the answer that I was giving was about traditional appliance vendors, right? I was not talking about software-only vendors that obviously are having a presence and they're making inroads within the system. I was talking more about the traditional appliance vendors that have both physical appliances as well as virtual. The uptake of virtual, I don't see it as strong for those vendors. Possibly because they're not trying to push for these solutions on the virtual side yet, or because the customers are not able to consume it because they're used to the delivery model of a physical appliance. That was my answer.
Excuse me, David, would you like to add something?
Well, I just wanted to add at the risk of everybody picking on Marco.
Great. I'm in the center, not by chance, but.
I will also offer that preserving the operational model should not be the goal, right? To build overlays that simply reproduce and have the same sort of configurational burden and error possibilities of the underlays, we just have made the problem combinatorially more complex. If we don't abstract, if we don't create more user-friendly expressions of how these resources are consumed, whether it be layer 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? In fact, I would offer that even the idea of still talking about things in terms of layered network protocol stacks is itself, part of the problem, part of the OpEx problem, not part of the SD and SDDC solution space.
Yeah, but you're not picking on me. I mean, I agree with you in terms of the long term. I'm just saying right now, we can be friends again. Right. In terms of short term, though, I think that there is still some work that needs to be done in order to get there. So some people are, if we want to consume these capabilities earlier, we need to look at the individual constituencies and just try to deliver something to them individually. And then over time, people will learn how to consume this more holistically, I think.
Well, and that's the common thread, I think, if I can abstract what I think I heard parts of all of you say was we're somehow starting over and it's new applications, not really worrying about what's out there today. If that has all this bad. In the world, we can envision that these things all play together in this way, and therefore we'll build an infrastructure to handle that.
You must not be trying to sell a product into this space. You must not be trying to sell a product into this space.
That's right.
Because
I heard. It seems like the assumption is that we can kind of ignore where we're at.
No, I think you're confusing two different things, right? I mean, I think the entire software defined, whether it's SDN, SDS, SDDC, whatever, right? I mean, the entire value proposition is in changing existing paradigms of usage and simplifying and automating and doing all of the things that David just talked about, right? And that's where we want to be, right? That's where we want to be, and we will get there. I mean, because I think the OpEx and value proposition that's being created is really pretty compelling, and there will be customers that'll get there, and then they will then be followed by others. So we will get there. The question really is, I think that you're asking perhaps is the migration steps that you take along the way in order to get there, in order to make it simpler for customers who don't have the luxury of starting with greenfield deployments. In terms of how they get there. And that's something that obviously needs to be thought through. Depends a lot on, a whole variety of, it depends on what you're trying to deliver to customers, and it is an extremely complicated problem, right? And I think, there's some solutions that we can talk about which are less, let's say, less of a forklift upgrade. Things like overlay infrastructures, right? Building virtualization using overlays. The reason I think it's become, it's gained so much adoption is largely because the migration from existing infrastructures is relatively straightforward. It's not by no means anywhere nearly as complicated as going and changing out the underlay. So I think you'll see aspects of what we're doing get adopted faster, right? But to me, there's no question that eventually the compelling value proposition will pay off, and you will see customers.
I can testify, firsthand that even the greenest of the green fields always have a little brown around the edges, right? They still touch the real existing legacy world, and real solutions that are being, architected and deployed today have to encompass that. In fact, it's one of the, not to, beat a point, but that part of a point that Inder made about the ability, for example, of the Open Daylight Project controller to support a variety of southbound interfaces, as they're called, right? To be able to directly, like IETF, I2RS, as well as OpenFlow, as well as other southbound interfaces to control a variety of infrastructure, all servoed to, a northbound interface that can abstract those, pan IT resources, is a real central part of this, SD **** thesis going forward.
I would like to add that probably more specifically, I believe there are different places in the network where definitely the legacy models will stay there for a long time. So the first level of firewalling, for example, from the internet, it's going to be a physical firewall, centralized firewall, protecting and providing the DMZ zone. So if you want to deploy an overlay, definitely you have to have a way to translate the overlay to basically basic VLANs that those firewalls vendors are providing, right? So whereas the other parts, like the internal firewalls, those are basically ideal candidate to actually virtualize, and I believe, in my opinion, to distribute. I don't believe in a virtual appliance centralized in one place, getting all the traffic, tromboning, and all of that, right?
In the back there, yes. Please stand up and talk loudly.
Everybody's speaking on me. That's great.
Don't sit in the middle next time.
Yeah, I'll sit under the table next time.
This is one of the statements but you said something about the network infrastructure, independent of the compute infrastructure or the application. And I was just wondering if you could clarify that, because I don't agree. I think as we're virtualizing, more and more of that functionality is getting closer to these applications, and especially from a programmability point of view, to understand not only what the application is, but you also need to understand the flows. And so I think there's a lot more dependency. But if you could clarify, that would be great.
Sure. Do you want to repeat the question, or shall I just repeat?
Yeah, go ahead, repeat.
The question is picking on me, right? See if what I said during my presentation was something to the extent that you can take an approach where you can apply the virtualization functionality, the software-defined approach separately for networking, for storage, for compute. You don't have to do everything together at the same time. I think that's the statement that I was making. And the comment is, well, I don't think that's true. I think you need to do everything together because you're going to have a certain amount of dependency between the different components. From my perspective, I think you don't really have a dependency. I think you might have correlation. You might want to be able to say, I have this information related to this the compute area. I want to use this information to program and to make more efficient utilization of the resources in one of the other silos, which is absolutely true, right? You're going to have to correlate different resources. The reason why I don't like to think about all or nothing in terms of virtualization is because you might have an environment where you want to start somewhere, and when you look at your IT infrastructure, you get overwhelmed right away because you don't know where to start. If the expectation is that you have to migrate everything right away, you don't know where to start, and you're frozen there. So instead, the baby step approach that I'm advocating is take one place, right? And probably you've already done some work on the compute side to do virtualization, at least on the compute side. You might have some virtual switching in place. What is the next step? The next step might be to go and look at your physical infrastructure with all those appliances that are sitting there and try to think about better ways to consume your networking, your layer 4.7 networking. And when you start looking at that, you don't need to have virtualization on the compute side, you don't need to have virtualization on the storage side. You can just replace those appliances with servers and run the same workloads you were running before, but now make more of the resources available to a number of workloads that change over time. And these are networking workloads, so they're owned by the same people that used to own the physical appliances. You're not taking away the responsibility from the people that used to have the responsibility. You're just replacing the physical resources with something more fungible that can be then optimized for workloads that might be bigger, might be smaller. And eventually, you're going to expand that approach to all the other environments with the final goal to have the orchestration layer, to have everything optimized for software. The God button at the top, you press the button, everything happens. That's the end goal, but it's not something you can get to by just displacing everything greenfield and pushing the approach across all different areas. That was the point that I was trying to make.
Are you going to change the slide?
No, why?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. There are lots of point use cases for SDN. We showed some of them in terms of integration with physical load balancers, denial of service appliances, which can solve particular problems and provide a closed loop solution where the SDN model provides information, a feedback loop into what's going on in the network, and that feedback loop is used either through an orchestration system or through an appliance to deliver a set of services. So that's the tangible thing that you can do within your network in a short period of time.
All right.
So, fantastic presentation, guys. I got one question and the opinion really. So I don't want to put you in spot.
Is it me again?
So there are three things that I kind of see bubbling up. One is the technology simplification standard. The other is what you mentioned about cross teams, the role of a network admin. And the third thing is application. People talk about it's all about apps. Which is the helping hand giving you to realize this vision, and which is friend and which is foe? What's the kind of the challenges you see in these three dimensions?
I think the biggest.
Okay, repeat the question, please.
Oh, repeat the question. Yeah, actually, the question was articulated. So I'm gonna get to a very short summary. What do you think is our friends, and what do you think are foes for the ability to get to the vision of a software-defined data center? I guess that somewhat represents your question. And from my perspective, the biggest problem is inertia. The biggest problem is the fact that people, because there's so much happening, people might be thinking they don't want to take any action until they see everything settle and look at whatever is left at the end of these conversations. And inertia is a problem because with inertia you're actually losing. You're not maintaining status quo it's making a choice. You're making a choice that is a bad choice because you're remaining behind the curve and you're not trying to. I mean, I guess the reason why everybody's speaking to me is because I was saying that operational convergence is not necessarily something that needs to be a prerequisite to be able to start using software-defined data centers. But I really believe in that. I think that when you want to build a software-defined data center, you have to start looking at your business processes and start addressing those, because one of the main reasons why we don't have this convergence is because business processes are being evolving independently for different sections of IT. But while you're doing that, you don't have to wait to have done that work on the business processes. You want to start feeding some of these technologies to your teams independently, hook them up on the ability to do things faster. And I think the networking team is the team that was shaken the most by what is happening lately, because they used to think that everything was status quo and everything was great and there was no reason to change. All the way to the point where the application developer got fed up and they decided to go somewhere else because the network was not responding in the time that they needed. And they got to realize that too late. So now, how do they adjust to that? One answer is just get rid of the network team and let somebody else handle it. But I think a better answer is equip the network team with the right resources so that they can participate into these conversations.
There's an interesting formulation that I think it was, I won't take credit for, it was like Steve Harrod or something like that, said, when you think about technology transitions like this in terms of ROI, return on investment, there's actually another ROI, which is risk of ignoring, right? That when there are fundamental changes afoot, sometimes it's hard to figure out what the financial mechanics are and how the roles and what the costs, how to even weight the costs and how to weight but there is a very real risk of ignoring the transitions because, as Marco said, in the context of inertia, you can be very left behind. In terms of friends, I'll tell you, to put in the definite friend bucket, everything that's going on in the DevOps, initiatives and culture that is transforming the way operations are being, increasingly done in enterprises and big, web properties, day in and day out today, is genuinely a driving force. It's not it's one of those things that's not a product. It's really, a culture and a process, but it is very much transforming the way a lot of people think about this stuff. Sorry.
No, that's great. Lauren.
So actually, I will agree with Marco for a change. Somebody agrees with you on a certain component. I think I was actually talking also with Ivan at the table. The silos in an organization are a big issue when you try to preach a new solution like this. And it's always working when they are coming to the table and understanding what the technology does for all of them. And any solution, like specifically in the Nuage Networks case, we really believe you kind of need to take care of all the components. So you need to provide the networking team the capability to do what they are doing in a better way, to basically provide like design templates and control who gets access to those templates, to maintain their function but improve it. And in the same time, you need to improve the service consumption model for the end users, for the IT guys. They should be able to basically just come there and get in a matter of minutes the compute interconnect done without them having to know all the details of the networking components. And I think the security guys, when they get involved, the same like the networking guys, they have to have the tools to verify if the policies that are being deployed in the network are compliant with their own security systems or security domains, what I was showing in that enterprise complex topology.
Yeah, right up in front.
Yeah, have any of you seen instances where the hypervisor guys all of a sudden started to build their own overlays, and all of a sudden that made some challenges where the network team finally had to catch up and respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think just perhaps as a follow-up to the previous question as well. I mean, I think a lot of the inhibitors, at least I've seen, in terms of acceptance of SDN, have been in some of the internal boundaries and internal turf that the various organizations within large enterprises typically have, right? So you find, for example, the networking guys, really somewhat threatened, right, by the fact that you can do things on an overlay which seem like they're networking functions, but somehow don't necessarily involve them. And there's, in some cases, it's legitimate. They're concerned about, people doing screwy things and, doing things without really understanding the impact, the broader impact. In some cases, it's just turf protection, right? I mean, they're concerned that they'd lose their livelihoods, and so I think this transition is going to cause a lot of that, and I think you'll see a lot of internal inhibitors, right, just from the structural ways in which organizations are constructed today.
Earlier on, I mentioned Conway's law, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a long time ago, wise computer scientists said that software architectures reflect the organizations the human organizations that create the software. And we all know that changing organizations is really tough, and it's much easier to do this stuff incrementally from the bottom up. But at some point, you need to look ahead and say, what should my organization, my operational organization, my services organization, my DevOps organization, what should that look like when we've achieved some measure of success in this transition? And you've got to start putting that in place ahead of time. If you wait until you need to change the organization, you will be too late. You need to change the organization in advance of the technology adoption, and that's just a brute fact of human organizations.
Yeah, one thing that has happened, one thing that has happened, I think, in virtualization of servers that is a step that didn't happen on the networking side, that didn't need to happen on the networking side, was the initial step, which for virtualization on the compute side was just optimizing consumption of the resources. You had servers that were sitting there doing nothing or more or less nothing, and 5%, 10% utilized. If you go to the network team and you tell them, your network is underutilized and you should use it more, they're probably going to get white hair very quickly if in certain environments, because there are lots of environments where networks is oversubscribed, right? There's a spectrum of things between oversubscribed networks and over-provisioned networks. And in certain environments, you might be lucky and you have an over-provisioned network where you can use any form of, you can have any form of overhead within the network and be okay with it. Other networks are designed specifically for the use cases that they've been built for. And in those cases, you're going to have an oversubscription problem. And oversubscription means that the moment you change a little bit the equation in the amount of traffic that is being sent to the network, you start having congestion.
You have the paradox that most networks, real networks of today, are globally totally undersubscribed, but locally falling over.
Exactly.
Right, because of the lack of systemic visibility into how they actually are work.
You know exactly how my cable modem's operating then.
Oh yeah. Everybody lives it every day.
Yeah,
it's exactly how the wireless is working in here right now.
That's exactly it as well. And I apologize for the interruption, but we're now getting in between everybody and their lunch, and I don't think we want to do that. So if you don't mind, folks, first of all, a hand to our panelists.